This conference will now be recorded.
I think you all heard that, and that wasn't me talking. Anyway, so there's information included in your packet, and really the basis for this is that the council's been talking sometime for funding, about funding, and part of that, a significant portion of that funding was going to be through sales tax revenues. As you may recall, during our previous discussion, I indicated that state law had changed, and that there was now a requirement that the state legislature pass and provide authority to the local unit of government to be able to put that on a ballot. You're probably aware, and as I explained a little bit in the memo, that didn't happen, and there are probably lots of fantastic reasons for that. But it is true that we were one of 14 communities that applied for that opportunity or that authority. And really, my understanding from the state Senate tax chair was that only 2 communities met the criteria, we being one of those communities. Regardless of that, it just wasn't acted upon by the state of Minnesota or by the state legislature, so that will not be on the ballot in November. However, we've continued to pursue financing options, and one of those things that's gone on, and this is a very positive thing, that we have been approved, and there now is over $9 million allocated through USDA for financing the fire hall. And so that would be a note with the EDA paid for by the city of St. Peter through its irrevocable lease of any facility that would be built with that. One of the nice things about this is that the interest rate is very low. Sally, can you turn on your microphone and chime in and help me remember what the interest rate is, even though I know I just want to get you in on the discussion.
Thanks, Don. Interest rate is locked at 2.25%. And it's good for 5 years. It cannot increase. It could decrease. So at closing, if interest would go down to 1.75, we would then get a 1.75% interest rate on that. So it cannot go up, can only go down at closing.
Just some clarification, it's a $9.3 million project. The rural development is not the entire 9.3, is it?
Rural development would be the entire 9.3 or 9.4. That's correct.
9.4 is what we've got.
Yep, that's correct. And so, so we don't need to bring any additional resources or anything like that. It's important to note, though, that as we move forward with this, think about this as a mortgage, not a construction loan. And so we would still have temporary financing that would be necessary in advance of closing on this USDA allocation and loan. This is exactly the same process that we utilized for the hospital, and which is just about at its conclusion. And the process for the EDA issuing any type of debt and then the city leasing that back from the EDA is exactly what we used as a part of the funding for the community center now about 20 years ago. And so these have been done before within the city of St. Peter. The city council at its Monday meeting talked about the potential change in timeline. They are going to talk more about that at a future workshop. They were presented with very similar information here, but my goal in bringing this to you now is twofold. One of which is to keep you updated, certainly give you the information that's most relevant and that is new so that you have it along with everybody else. And then to put you in a position at some time, and I don't know exactly when that sometime is, it could be at your next regular meeting, it could be a month or 2 down the line, but at some point we'll need some level of action from the city council, from the EDA, and then ultimately from the city council. An award letter, an award resolution is necessary from USDA. And so again, my goal is to get you ready for that, or if you have any questions now or in the interim, to be available to answer any of those questions. Happy to talk about the fire station as a whole if you want, happy to talk about the funding, the mechanisms, happy to talk about sales tax, pros and cons and all that kind of stuff, whatever you have interest in talking in, Mr. Chair, Russ, and the rest of the committee. Oh, Sally, let me ask one more thing. This is probably one of the very cool things about this. We had projected with the fire hall that if we went out for what might be considered more conventional financing, that the interest rate would be somewhere around 3.5 or so. And so the calculation, Sally, is that by doing it this way through the EDA, we save about how much over the term? Do you remember?
3.2 million in interest. over the term of the loan, over the 40 years.
So I don't know if everybody heard that. It was kind of garbled for me. Can you say it one more time, Sally?
Yes, 3.2 million is the savings over the 40 years in interest payments on 9.4 million.
So that's a chunk of money anyway. So I wanted you to be aware of kind of the calculation and things that go along with that. So Mr. Chair, Russ, members, I'd stand for any questions that you might have about any of those topics.
Anyone, just turn on your mic and jump in.
Todd, this is Bob.
Todd, if you could just give us a little over
first.
Who?
Mike, go ahead.
So just a little overview of the construction or of the style, or I assume this is being built, state of the art, built for the future. As St. Peter grows, the fire department needs will grow, or the needs for the fire department, and the station will be able to accommodate those growth needs. Can you just comment on that?
Yeah, so I think included in your packet, we showed some really preliminary graphics of the look of the building right now based on the building committee, which Ed sits on. Ed and the mayor, 2 firefighters sit in on, I sit on, our architect, our construction manager. We have an architect that's been hired for a couple of years, and construction managers, R.W. Karlstrom from Mankato. They made the recommendation to the city council, and we continue on a design platform that is largely a tip-up building for the garage areas, and then a metal profile cement building for the rest of it. So as you can probably see in the packet, we believe that it's a nice looking building. It definitely is for the future. I think we realize that any building that we build, certainly at this location and for this purpose, is likely to be in use as a fire station for more than 50 to 75 years. The building is planned with an extra bay. Right now, the plan is that will be bid as an alternate, a deduct alternate. And so we don't really need that bay now, but we'll price it. And if the pricing comes out great, it might be built, and it is included in the $9 million budget that you see. But it could be something that's removed if the cost is too high as well. It will support function. And so I could talk for a very long time about this, and maybe Ed could talk about it too, since he sits on the building committee. It's great to have garages. It's great to have doors. It's great to have a meeting room and all that stuff. But frankly, from my perspective, the biggest thing that this has that the current fire hall does not is that we're able to support the safety things, the health and safety things for firefighters that we can't do now. So with decontamination areas and shower areas for equipment and cleaning areas for equipment that we can't support now. And as all of you probably know or have read, with modern construction and age of houses and buildings, when those firefighters go places, they bring things home with them that were never intended from a chemical perspective, smoke perspective, those kind of things. And so our goal is to ensure that we're supporting that in a really good way. And that's, regardless of the square footage, from a use standpoint, that from my perspective is the biggest thing that this will add that we currently really don't have an ability to make work well at all. So I don't know, Ed, I don't want to put you on the spot. I hadn't necessarily intended to do that, but I don't know, maybe you have a different or similar perspective. But yes, plan for the future, mostly cement buildings, offices inside, meeting room inside, garages, all that kind of stuff.
Hey, Todd, one other last question, then I'll be quiet. This may be more of a fire chief question, but given the location of the new station, how is that going to impact positively or negatively, I guess, response times based on where it would be located and maybe where the majority of the current firefighters live? Will there be additional travel time to the station, or will there be less travel time? Things like that, just curious.
So let me talk about process if I can first, Mike, to answer that question. Let me answer the question directly first. It will be a little bit of a mixed bag to start out with. However, the process that we went through, we did a location study, and that study included, forgive me if I might have the exact wrong number, but I think it was 5 years of fire data, and then data from where firefighters currently lived. And there was a location priority list developed from the analysis of that. And that analysis wasn't just as simple as saying, what's the closest route. It was analyzing where stop signs were, where stop lights were, where they were likely to be based on the future transportation plan in the city. And so there was an analysis done on where that is. I will tell you that the study indicated very clearly that the best location for a fire hall was located about a good baseball throw from the current hospital. And that might seem really odd, but that's the best location. This location, as we've, or at least I've affectionately called it, was 3.1. So a location about a quarter section away from here was actually identified as the number 3 location. At the time of the study, this site had just been sold or purchased. And so it was thought that at the time of the study that this wasn't readily available. Things changed, and so the council was able to purchase it. So again, I'd mentioned it or categorized this as being site 3.1. So it's definitely in the top tier of sites based on where we respond to fires, where firefighters are currently located, and where we expect firefighting to continue to migrate to. And just to be clear, although I said firefighting, the majority of calls that the fire department responds to now are not fire related. They are emergency related and hazardous material and all kinds of other things. It is just not fires anymore. And so and we respond to anywhere from, I don't know, mid 60s to mid 70s in emergency call responses every year, just to kind of give you an order of magnitude on that as well. I hope that answers.
Yeah, it's a great answer, and I think it's a great location myself. Just personally, I was thrilled to hear that that's where it was going for the city's sake.
Yeah, from a land use perspective and how we think about that corridor with this middle school and water treatment and Catholic church and high school, it's kind of an institutional corridor. And
right.
So this fits in, I think, there really well. I appreciate your comment, though.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike. Bob, you had a question or a comment?
Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to understand the financing aspect of it. Does the EDA borrow the money?
Yeah, technically the EDA would be borrowing the money, and that would be secured through an irrevocable lease with the city of St. Peter. And again, that's exactly the same process that we used when we funded the community center after the tornado.
Okay.
And the community center debt was paid off this year.
You would need
actually the community center was paid off this year, yeah.
So you would need a construction loan, and then when it's done, it would be into that fixed rate financing?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And that's a 40-year loan with the rate. Is the rate fixed 40 years, or was that 5 years that I heard?
The rate is fixed for 40 years at 2.25% or better if it's better at time of closing. And I know you're a banker, so when I say better, I mean lower.
Right.
Good one.
We don't have to build for 5 years, so that's good for 5 years is what I was trying to say, Bob.
Yeah, so the commitment to that level is for 5 years.
So as long as you commit to it, you have 5 years to have that thing done.
Yes. Well, yes. And so, I mean, technically, even potentially longer, I wouldn't want to stretch it. But as long as we're continuing to make progress, we could certainly ask. If we were under construction in the 5th year and the closeout final construction wasn't going to occur until 6 years, 1 month or something like that, I think we'd still be okay.
Gotcha.
The goal from my perspective is not to push it that far out. We're really trying to make the arrangements, and now is an ideal time for interest rates and to be locked in with this.
Yep.
Any follow up, Bob?
So what's the timeline on the committing to the loan?
So right now the dollars are set aside for 5 years, as we've discussed with USDA. So maybe you were asking the question, Bob, of when does it appear the council's going to want to build?
So, okay, so we've already got that loan, or that's done.
Yes, so we have a letter of commitment from USDA already. We are locked and loaded. We have some paperwork to do, which will come over the next couple months, but we are locked and loaded set already right now.
But we don't have to vote on anything. This is just information.
Today it's information, but in the next couple of months, I will be asking you to pass a resolution that they require as a part of the paperwork stream.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
Can you
so
talk about
as an
construction?
example, if you passed that next month, you would be great. If it waited 5 months, that's no problem. We are still at 40 years, 2.25%.
Mike, did you have a comment?
I just had a question about the construction financing. Can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we anticipate, certainly Shannon has been working with us on this. We anticipate that that will be the form of what we might consider a more conventional bond issue. That would be an interim that would be secured by the commitment of USDA. Again, that's really exactly the same process that we utilized with the expansion of the hospital. And so again, the security on that short-term or construction bond would be the commitment by USDA. And they sign off on it and have to approve all the documentation and all that. So we're in good shape there, and that's well understood, and we've done it, again, just recently.
So if our local banks were interested, we should contact Shannon and get the particulars and find out how we can get participate in that, correct?
Yeah, please feel free to give him a call. We are not at the stage, frankly, of knowing when we were going to do that exactly yet.
Right. Okay.
Just for everybody, I think everybody knows Shannon, but it's Shannon Sweeney with David Drown. They work with us on bonding and tax increment. Former community development director of St. Peter.
Yeah.
Corey, Brad, Ed?
Ed, I kind of ran over you when the questions came. I don't know if you have anything more to share about the building since you're on the building committee, but.
No, Todd, you pretty much covered everything. The big thing is we obviously need more space and individual lockers instead of everybody piling their stuff into one area, and places to clean up after fires and so forth, which we do not have right now.
Corey, I see you turned the microphone.
And I hope it don't go out 6 years, Todd.
I don't want it to. Well, so let me be frank. The council had a discussion on Monday night, and if you've looked at the packet, you saw this. I came to the council and said, you know, without the certainty of that sales tax, this is a more challenging project. And is there value in looking at holding for a year until the state legislature can take action to give the local unit of government, in this instance the city, the authority to vote on a sales tax? We can't do it this November, but hopefully we could do it next November. It is also true, folks, that the legislature, at least according to House research, has one time in the past provided what one might call retroactive sales tax. By that, more specifically, I mean a project was already built or in the process of being built, and then the local unit of government solicited and received approval for a local option sales tax. So I don't recommend that happen. We are in a position today that if the council wanted to move forward today, we would have to hope, and I don't know how to gauge that or how to handicap that, but we would have to hope that the legislature would give us approval after the council has formally initiated a project, whether it's initiated bids or solicited proposals or started construction. There's a risk in that. I think that risk is substantially mitigated today by having 2.25% locked in for 5 years. Let me rephrase that, for 40 years, but that opportunity available for 5 years. And what we see, and our construction manager articulates, as a flattening of inflation in the commercial construction marketplace, where before we thought anywhere from 5 to 10% was likely the per year inflation rate on commercial construction. Now it's very, very flat. And so that gives us some cost aversion opportunity that frankly we didn't have 6 months ago. My recommendation to the council is to hold for a year, get that sales tax approval. It's just a really conservative approach. It's not the right approach necessarily. The council determines that, but it's a conservative approach. I wouldn't have made that recommendation if we wouldn't have been able to get 2.25%, and we would have saw construction inflation at 10%. That then's a bad call. Then we probably got to move. But with those two things, we have the luxury maybe of being able to wait a year if the council so desires.
Good analysis.
So we'll see. And they're going to talk about that some more. They got information last on Monday night, and they asked to have it on an agenda in the future. There's a lot of moving parts, and I know there's a lot of folks to visit with and talk to, and that are really invested in making something very positive happen for the community with a new fire station. And so no one likes to. It's a hard discussion to have, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Other questions?
Let me mention one other thing, Russ, if I can. This relates to the discussion with the council and what's been articulated within the community overall on a number of different occasions. Please don't take a discussion about any hold for a year as a discussion of not building a fire station. This has been described and discussed very clearly that the council is building a fire station. Whether sales tax helps pay for it or not is what people will vote on. This is not going to be a referendum on whether there is a fire station or not. And this is probably more blunt than I talk in most instances on these kind of issues, but you got to have a new fire station, and something has to move forward. And the way that's been described here, the way that the planning that's been done with Sally, the building committee, the architect, the construction managers, financing, USDA, all says that this is a very reasonable, appropriate, cost-efficient way to move forward. And so I think that continues to be where the council is at on that, from a perspective of whether we need one or not.
Question?
So everyone, yeah, we didn't bring it up here. We did discuss it at the council the other night. If we have a sales tax, that will pay $270,000 of the $358,000 of debt service. So local property taxes would increase about 2 points in their levy rate. It would go from 51.58 where it is today to 53.25. If sales tax referendum does not pass, the 358 is what we would have to levy for, and your tax rate would go up from 51.58 up to 57.28. So there is quite a differential. On a $150,000 house, that would mean $19.80 a year with sales tax, or $71.87 without per year. So it is a substantial savings to the taxpayer. As you said, we have other people paying it that don't live within the city limits. So.
And I know we all pay sales tax too, right? I go to the hardware store like everybody else does and pay sales tax, but lots of other people will help contribute to that debt service. And that's been the theory behind sales tax from the get-go, frankly, with a fire hall. And then it does serve a broader base than just the taxpayers in St. Peter.
Yep. And we'd be at the same tax rate as what Mankato is. So.
Would the townships have a higher annual fee then? Would they be paying part of the capital, or?
No, the townships under the current fire contracts are exempted from paying for new fire hall. They have to pay for other stuff like trucks and that kind of stuff. They have to help with that, but the building is exempted from that.
Other questions? Just jump in.
And if you have questions later, let us know. Again, one of my goals was to make sure you were prepared for action in the not too distant future. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's a couple months, but we do have some paperwork stuff that we have to move forward. We are locked, but right, it's government, there's still paperwork to do.
Well, thank you, Mr. Frafke and Sally. You're free to stick around if you choose. But if there's nothing else, we'll move on to item number B. That is the discussion regarding the COVID loans. You've got Corey says he's having internet problems and he can't connect. We still have a quorum then with the four of you that remain. So please stay on the line with us. But when the COVID program was put together, the microloan in March, it was anticipated that it would sunset at some point. As you can see in the loan report, the activity has been curtailed considerably. The last loan was made last Friday, but that kind of sat in the hopper as we were waiting for a little more documentation. So that one actually was submitted about a month ago. We finally got the appropriate documentation of lease, et cetera. So we closed on that last Friday, but activity has been curtailed significantly. And it would be my recommendation that you adopt the resolution that's been prepared, accepting applications for the COVID-19 microloan program through the 31st of August. Any questions, comments, or discussion? Hearing none. Oh, Brad, go ahead.
I have to unmute myself. Todd, you mentioned something at the city council meeting the other night about the county passing a grant program for businesses. Could you elaborate on what Nicollet County is doing with their CARES money and how that might impact what we do?
Yeah, so let me defer to Russ just a little bit. Yes, we did talk about it, and actually I had a Nicollet County City Liaison meeting at 10:30 this morning where we talked a little bit more. Russ has the particulars about what that program is going to look like. I think the action that's recommended by staff today for the EDA on having a closing date, this is a really good date to really work and maximize the ability of businesses to utilize the programs. And so Russ can talk about particulars if you're interested in what the program looks like, but we're going to help promote it for sure.
Yeah, I should have checked. They were going to discuss it, and I think they were going to give Ryan Crush, the county administrator, some direction. And if they did, they were going to consider approving that next week. But they're proposing,
That's correct.
Yep, they're proposing loans or grants actually between $5,000 and $10,000 for businesses that were impacted by the governor's orders for closure or were restricted to takeout for restaurants and such. Or that you have to demonstrate that your business had a loss of revenue or income of at least, I believe it was 25% for 2 consecutive months. Those will be actual grants to businesses. They're setting aside about $1 million for Nicollet County. So this will apply in Cortland and North Mankato and St. Peter. So it'll be a lot of businesses. Daycares will be eligible. Nonprofits will be eligible. Those that received the city loans, as long as ours have been structured as a loan and not a grant, then they'd be eligible to access the county funding. Todd, did you get any more this morning?
No, other than the timeline that you articulated is the timeline that they remain on, so likely approval at their next commissioners meeting. I think how I look at this and how county administration has looked at this is that if a business would get a grant from the county and our program was converted to a grant program at some time in the future, okay.
Yeah, for the city received $901,000 in CARES Act money from the federal government, and it can only be spent on COVID-related expenses, unbudgeted COVID-related expenses. So we couldn't, put 800,000 of that into a fire station or other municipal services. So it needs to be COVID, and I think I won't speak for the administration, but I think our analysis said that the actual city's expenditures are relatively minor. Is that correct, Todd?
Yeah, and our plan for what happens with COVID money is still evolving. We are probably holding a little bit tighter because of the county program and some of the other things that are going on. But the council will have a discussion about that within the next month and see kind of what a tentative plan looks like and what the financial impact is. But generally, our PPE expenses, those type of things are an additional cost, again, that were not budgeted. And we cannot use this to replace lost revenue, is somewhere in the $60,000 to $70,000 range.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Other questions?
Looks like Corey had a question that says, how soon did For the Team close after taking the money, and have they paid any of it back?
Yeah, they have started paying it back at $100 a month beginning, I believe it was July. I'm going to pull out their file here.
Andy says thank you.
Sure. So in the packet, it'll say when we closed on the loan. So we closed on that loan on April 10th, and it was about 6 weeks later. Well, not even that. It was on the 14th of July is when he signed the authorization to begin the automatic payments at $100 a month. So we did get, well, he has started repaying at $100 a month through an automatic payment.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Would there anyone be inclined to move the resolution that's been prepared that would establish a deadline to accept applications through Monday, August 31st? It's on page 14 and concludes on page 15 of the packet.
Ed will make a motion for the resolution to end on August 31st.
We have a motion by Johnson. Is there a second?
Bob.
And we have a second by Southworth. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll on this. And Member Southworth.
Aye.
Member DeVos.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Member Abels. Corey, can you put an A in the I in the chat, or then Mr. Favor?
Aye.
And Corey did put in the
Voted.
chat yes. So thank you all. We removed item C. That leaves us with the Chamber of Commerce marketing efforts. I apologize. I really thought Ed was going to be able to join us virtually here, but he said he had a board meeting that was scheduled. You got his report. He's almost about halfway through, or spent about half of the $10,000. He's at $4,337 essentially. Do you have questions for me? I'm going to ask Ed to join us certainly at the next meeting, because we'll be at our regular Thursday and probably won't conflict with his Wednesday afternoon meeting. Questions, comments? Hearing none, we will consider that a report. You're not asked to take any action. Under the reports, you have the revolving loan report. You can see the activity. The council did approve the extension of the Kottke balloon payment, and they did take your recommendation and maintain the interest rate at 3% rather than increase it to reflect the prime. Any questions on the loan report? Hearing none. Only other item, gentlemen, that I would have for your purposes is that the Regional Economic Development Alliance annual meeting will be held on the 15th of September. And I think this would be the 4th, but this is going to be the first virtually held REDA meeting. Janet 80 from 80 Advantage, she's a site selector that I met as I was doing some economic development training, and she spoke to us about the site selection process. She's a second generation site selector. Her father was a charter member of the Site Selectors Guild, which is a pretty prestigious organization. And it sounds like she's going to be the keynote address. And she's going to talk about COVID and how that's impacted economic development and site selection process and business activities. So you will all be getting an invitation, and I don't have to ask if you're going to have chicken or steak this time because you're going to be eating your own food. So any questions on the annual meeting? I think some of you may have attended in the past. I'm not sure. Well, I guess it was probably John Kwame that attended all of them in the past. But gentlemen, anyone have a question or anything that for the good of the cause? I would request then that we have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
DeVos will move.
We have a motion by DeVos. Is there a second?
Bob will second.
And a second by Southworth. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
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 We're gonna say, anyone opposed to adjourning, say aye. Gentlemen, we are adjourned. We'll intend to meet the first Thursday of September unless you hear otherwise. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful afternoon and stay safe and stay well.
See you, everybody.
See ya.
See you later.